Can God create a rock so big that he couldn't lift it? Now, the first part of the sentence, no problem with it at all. Can God create a rock that's so big? Yeah, of course he can. If he's all powerful, as we're presupposing, then he can create a rock as big as he wants. The problem is with the last bit, that's so big that he couldn't lift it. The problem with this part is that it presupposes an anthropomorphic God. In order to talk about God lifting anything, you have to imagine him to be bodied, which means you have to imagine him to be a finite spatial being. Not only that, he has to be subject to gravity and on something like a planet or something in order to be able to lift that thing above his head. This is ridiculous because this is not the definition of what God is. God is referred to as infinite, not as finite, as unique, as not like anything that's in creation. So you can't use words and terms that we associate with created finite beings, such as lift, and then try to apply that to an infinite being. Terms like lift can't apply to it, again, because they presuppose all these terms, Allah or God is the source of and isn't subject to, i.e. space, time, gravity, things like that. The second problem arises when you look at the terms and what is actually being asked in the question. So when you think of God as the infinite, as what he's defined as, and what is presupposed in this question in order for this question to make any sense at all, and if you then look at the stone as the finite thing or a finite thing, this whole question becomes quite problematic, because what it is actually asking in that case is, can the infinite create something finite that is so infinite that it's more infinite than the infinite, which is technically what is being asked. Can God create a rock that itself could overcome God? Can an infinite thing create another thing that we're still referring to as a finite thing, which is what a rock is, but make this finite thing simultaneously be infinite, which is a contradiction. Highlighting again the problem with the question itself. It's asking strange things. It presupposes contradictions within its logic in order to then establish a contradiction in its answers. And then it uses the contradiction in its answers to go, haha, God doesn't exist, look at that. But the only reason the contradiction in the answers existed in the first place was because of the prior contradictions in the internal logic of the question. You can't use this as definitive proof of debunking of the idea of an omnipotent being. If something is infinite, it's by definition not finite. If something is finite, it's by definition not infinite. You might as well be asking God to create something dry that's the wettest thing ever. Which one do you want? Do you want something dry or do you want something wet? Do you want something finite or infinite? Black or white? You can't ask for two opposing things simultaneously. And if you ask for two opposing things simultaneously and then you realise that the answer becomes problematic, it's not because you're being clever, you're asking a silly question.